Joining me now from Durham is Hannah Davies. She's the Health Inequalities Lead for the Northern Health Science Alliance and a co-author of this report. Welcome to you, Hannah. And we're also delighted to be joined by Nikki Jolly. She's in Darlington and she's the Managing Director of HR2Day, a business that helps small and medium-sized firms with HR and recruitment across the region. So she really has her finger on the economic and business pulse. Thank you both for joining me. So, Hannah, this is quite a hard-hitting report. Were you surprised at the extent of these inequalities in both health and wealth and how they'd worsened during lockdown?
So, I think it hasn't been a great surprise that the North has had worse outcomes than the rest of the country. We've produced a previous report that showed that around a third of the productivity gap between the North and the rest of England is down to ill health. But what did surprise us was the extent that the pandemic had worsened those North and the rest of the country health inequalities. So to have a 17% higher mortality rate is phenomenal. And we also, looking at that in terms of the productivity gap, that means that the whole of the UK will be £7.3 billion worse off because of those health inequalities. And this is something that we really need to address for the health and wealth of the North and the entire country.
It's surprising, isn't it? There's a contrast because as a journalist, somebody who goes to the north of England, often family connections in the north of England, I'm hearing lots of good news coming out of the north of England. And I'm talking hearing government ministers talking a lot about levelling up. They're almost like speak your weight machines. What your report has unearthed, though, is that the sharp end, both health and economic outcomes, there really is a long way to go.
There is. And I mean, I live in Durham. I grew up in Durham. The north of England is an absolutely fantastic place with fantastic people and huge amounts of potential. We've got more world-class universities in the north of England than in France, Spain and Italy combined. We have fantastic hospitals that are world-leading in clinical research, in treating patients. But we can't ignore the disparities. While we're looking at the good news stories, we can't ignore the fact that to get to the place we want to be, there are fundamental issues we need to tackle, and health is one of those fundamental issues.
As well as learning lots from your report, which I've been reading avidly this morning, I've been doing some of my own research. I think we can bring up a graphic here of the broader regional disparities in the UK compared to other countries, if we could see that graphic. Now, let me just explain it here. This is what's called the output gap between the richest and the poorest regions. So the richest regions are above the 90th percentile of income by region, and the poorest are a bit in the bottom 10% percentile by region. And you see there in the UK, that difference is 2.25%, massive. Italy's also quite unequal. We all know about the huge north-south division in Italy between Turin and Milan, the industrial heartlands, and the poorer south of Italy. Food's better in southern Italy, though. The US, which we think of as a very unequal place with the Rust Belt and the shining coastal cities, we're a lot more unequal than the US. And look how much more unequal we are by region than New Zealand and Japan. So again, Hannah, given those numbers, what is it that your report is calling for to try to address these really vast regional inequalities shown by your report and by that graph that I just showed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that, Lord Kerslake did a report a few years ago that shows that the gap between the north and the rest and the south of England is similar to that between East and West Germany before they reunified. So, yeah, absolutely. They are significant and they need to be addressed by proper investment. So we're trying to really change the economic outcomes of our society. Third of that is ill health that we've looked at. So let's look at a cradle to grave approach to keeping people healthy. Prevention is definitely much better than cure. So we need to look at stuff like the Sure Start centres that were set up and that were proven to lower infant mortality.
So that's providing affordable childcare so women can get back to work, take part in the labour force, and kids get looked after.
Absolutely. So schemes like that. And then we need to look through to helping employers to support their employees through mental health and wellbeing programs. Our NHS hospitals have got a lot of experience in that they should be supported to share out with the larger communities. There should be investment in health research to increase. I mean, the North of England has been highlighted as one of the leading places for health innovation. It's one of its it's one of its prime capabilities. So let's invest in that properly. When we're trying to achieve that 2.4 R&D investment increase through government, let's invest in the north. If it can be done in the north of England, it should be done in the north of England. So let's invest in hospitals, schools, the people of the north of England, and those areas in which we can really make a difference and really grow the north of England.
Nikki Jolly, let's bring you in from Darlington. You've seen those regional income disparities, the health disparities highlighted in the report that Hannah co-authored. I see you as somebody who's really on the front line of the economy, if you like. Your company's involved in lots of decisions to hire, to lay off workers. You're involved in recruitment. You can really see which way the labour market is going. Do you think there's a lot of good news out there in the north of England? Do you think there's a lot of economic progress being made?
I think it's huge. I think the Northeast is the place to be. It's so exciting at the moment. You know, we've obviously seen people through the pandemic. We work with a range of clients, but I would say over 50% of our clients are manufacturing and engineering. If anything, they've thrived through this. They've grown. Our client base have grown. I personally have doubled my turnover and had to do some salary adjustments for my existing team, and I'm also doubling my workforce. So across the board, my salaries have gone up by 25%. I do think that's part of the Treasury coming. So I do think we have challenges to oversee, but I think for all the right reasons. I think these gaps are clearing. I think we've got energy. I think we've got so much in the area. We're one of sort of the manufacturing engineering hubs in this area. And, you know, we've got the Tees Valley Combined Authority that are out there pushing for everything in this. I just think the Northeast is the place to be. And actually, recruitment is really difficult, so we need more talent and people moving to the area because it's the one thing that actually we're struggling with.
That's interesting. I mean, you're in Darlington. The Treasury's announced it's going to put a Treasury campus on Darlington, moving part of Whitehall to that famous railway town. You've mentioned the South Sea Development Corporation, which in many ways is really the kind of ground zero of levelling up. A huge amount of attention. You've got your Mayor Ben Houchen, who is obviously what knows Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, quite well, which can be quite handy. And I mean, I've been up to your part of the world quite a few times over the last year, and there's definitely something happening, particularly in your part of the world. Darlington, Middlesbrough, the Northeast in general, Tyneside, of course. But just have a look at some of these numbers. I've got some more numbers to show you without wishing to put a downer on your upbeat message, which I largely share. But here's some numbers which show destitution across the UK as a whole and the Northwest. Now, these are numbers that I calculated along with the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, which was one of Britain's leading think tanks. And you can see there that in 2019, so pre-pandemic, the percentage of destitute households in the UK was less than 1%. Destitute means a couple living on less than £100 a week, or a single person in a household living on less than £75. So very, very low levels of income. And the level of destitution in the UK more than doubled during the pandemic there. You see from 2019 to 2020, from 0.7% to 1.25%. But look at the Northwest, from 0.7 to 4.5%. Absolutely huge. And why did that happen? That happened because the Northeast has lots of manufacturing, and manufacturing tended to sort of carry on eventually during the pandemic. Of course, there's lots of manufacturing in the Northwest too, but the bulk of the Northwest, which started the pandemic as a much richer region with respect to the Northeast, it's the kind of touchy-feely economy. It's culture, it's hospitality, it's creative things, it's customer-facing stuff that the Northwest does so well. And you had a really big increase in the destitution there. So let me come back again to Hannah. Within your report, what areas of the North in particular, could you break it down a little bit, were the real crunch points, the areas where you saw the health and wealth outcomes falling particularly behind compared to the rest of the country?
Okay, so I'd say the first thing is that the North experiences levels of deprivation on a scale that is much bigger than the rest of the country. So breaking it down is it's possible, and areas like Middlesbrough have some of the worst child poverty rates in the entire country. Over half of the north of England has worse health outcomes than the worst area in the south. So that's one thing we need to bear in mind as well, is scale is huge across the north of England. And while there's loads of good news stories, it's not enough at the moment to level up properly and to make the difference that we need to improve people's lives and to tackle poverty. So another area that has been really bad is when we look at child poverty. So child poverty has really grown across the north of England. And we can see with the free school meals, this is an issue that people really care about. No one wants to see children going hungry. We need to recommit to ending child poverty. We need to look to improve the life outcomes of children from the moment from before birth, okay? And that's a way that we can really improve the economic and health outcomes of the country, because it's proven that if children come from deprived households, they're less likely to have better educational outcomes, and that means they're less able to fill the jobs that we so desperately need to fill across the north of England. All of these different determinants work together to make an area stronger.
You talk about filling jobs there, Hannah, and that's what Nikki Jolly does for a living. Earlier this week On the Money, we interviewed Graham MacDonald, Nikki, the CEO of JCB, no less, and he really went in quite hard, I thought, on the UK skills shortages. JCB has its own skills academy, famously, but he said the government isn't taking the skills shortage seriously enough. Tell us about the availability of skilled workers where you are in the Northeast, an area which, as you say, is really at the moment enjoying an investment moment in the sun.
Skilled workers are the hardest, to be honest. We've got a range of different jobs across the board, and skilled workers, it's either really expensive to recruit them to the point that it's unattainable moving forward, and you've got to plan your business that you can sustain this. It's not an instant quick fix. And there's just not enough people. Part of it, I think, is people are scared. Is there going to be another lockdown? Dare I move? Shall I start looking for another job? And I think that may come to an end at the later part of this year. But I do think we are missing some of our European workers as well. I think that's really not just lower end, but skilled workers. I really do think that's been hard hitting.
Do you think some may come back, Nikki? A lot of them have got leave to remain. They might have gone back just for COVID. Do you think some of them will come back? After all, they're going to earn a lot more in the northeast of England than they are in Eastern Europe.
I think if travel is easier and better, I think at the moment the restrictions aren't helping. I think we need to start looking at those to start encouraging people and bringing people back. I do think it's a bit of a longer journey. I don't think it's a quick fix, but yes, I do think they will come back. The opportunities are fantastic and they're there for anybody who wants to come and grab them. It's just not going to be in the next few months because I think we've just got so much work to be doing.